Pablo Escobar. The name itself echoes through history. He was not just a criminal, he became a legend, a dark icon of the 20th century. Escobar built an empire that stretched across the globe. He challenged governments and instilled fear in millions. His power seemed limitless for a time. He was the undisputed king of cocaine. His ambition knew no bounds. Escobar's name became synonymous with narco-terrorism. He aimed to control not just the drug trade, but Colombia itself. His legacy is a tangled web of terror and twisted philanthropy. Colombia, a nation of breathtaking beauty, was brought to its knees. Escobar's reign of terror left deep, bleeding scars. Car bombs became a horrifyingly common sound in cities like Medellin and Bogotá. The air itself seemed thick with fear and suspicion. No one felt truly safe. The government, police, and judiciary were infiltrated and corrupted. Many honest officials paid the ultimate price for standing against him. The country was plunged into a brutal internal conflict. Escobar's empire did not just scar Colombia, it reshaped the world. The sheer volume of cocaine he exported fueled an epidemic of addiction in the United States and Europe. The war on drugs, largely a response to figures like Escobar, intensified globally. His life story continues to fascinate, a stark reminder of the devastating human cost of the global drug trade. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was born. The date was December 1, 1949. His birthplace was Rio Negro, a rural town. His father, Abel de Jesus Dari Escobar, was a farmer. His mother, Hermilda Gaviria, taught at an elementary school. They were a family of modest means. Young Pablo grew up surrounded by green hills. Life in Rio Negro was simple, perhaps too simple for Pablo. His family later moved to Envigado, a suburb just south of Medellin. Even as a boy, Pablo showed signs of a restless spirit. He was not content to follow the expected path. He dreamed of wealth and power. Pablo attended school, but he was no model student. He found formal education uninspiring. He was restless, eager for action, not for books. He briefly attended the Liceo Lucrecio Jaramillo Vélez, but he soon dropped out without a high school diploma. His real education began on the streets of Medellin. He started small with petty crimes. Legend has it he stole tombstones, sanded them down and resold them. He also allegedly ran scams with fake lottery tickets. These were minor hustles, but they were formative. He learned to navigate the underworld. He was laying the groundwork for what was to come. The small-time scams soon gave way to bolder crimes. Pablo graduated to car theft. He became known for his efficiency in this domain. He allegedly started a car theft ring. He would steal cars, dismantle them, and sell the parts, or he would ransom them back to their owners. Then came kidnapping. In 1971, he was allegedly involved in kidnapping a wealthy Medellin industrialist, Diego Echevarria Misas. Echevarria was later found dead. Escobar was rumored to have collected a handsome ransom. He began to work with other criminals, forming alliances. He was ready for the next big step. A new drug was taking hold in the 1970s. It was called cocaine. Colombia was perfectly placed to exploit this. Pablo Escobar saw this opportunity. He understood its immense potential. Escobar did not invent the cocaine trade, but he aimed to perfect it, to dominate it. He started by moving coca paste from Bolivia and Peru. He set up laboratories to refine the paste into pure cocaine hydrochloride. Smuggling the finished product was the next challenge. He began using small airplanes, bought remote airstrips, and bribed officials. He was building an empire founded on white powder. Pablo Escobar did not build his empire alone. He was a central figure in forming the Medellin cartel. This was an alliance of powerful traffickers. It included men like the Ochoa brothers, Carlos Leder, and Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha. Together, they pooled their resources and coordinated their smuggling routes. The Medellin cartel operated like a multinational corporation. It had a clear, if brutal, structure. Escobar's rule was enforced by a simple, terrifying philosophy: plata o plomo, silver or lead, money or a bullet. By the early 1980s, the Medellin cartel held a near monopoly. Pablo Escobar became one of the wealthiest men on the planet. El Patron ascendant, wealth, power, and early defiance. Escobar's wealth was impossible to hide. He flaunted it. His most famous possession was Hacienda Napoles. This was a vast estate covering thousands of acres. It had a private zoo filled with exotic animals like hippos and elephants. It had its own airport, a collection of classic cars, and even a bull ring. This was more than a home. It was a monument to his ego. It was a symbol of his power, a declaration that he lived above the law. He owned countless other properties, planes, and boats. He lived like a modern-day emperor, his kingdom built on cocaine. Yet mere riches were not enough for Pablo Escobar. He craved legitimacy. He yearned for social acceptance, even respect. This ambition led him into the world of Colombian politics. In 1982, he achieved a stunning feat. He was elected as an alternate member of Colombia's Chamber of Representatives. A known drug lord now sat in the halls of government. He used this position to shield his operations. He also cultivated a Robin Hood image. He built housing projects for Medellin's poor. He constructed football pitches and handed out cash. To some, he was El Patron, a benefactor. His foray into politics, however, was destined to be brief. His criminal past was too notorious to ignore. Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, Colombia's courageous Minister of Justice, began to speak out. Lara Bonilla publicly denounced Escobar. He exposed his cocaine trafficking activities to the nation. He presented evidence of Escobar's criminal empire. This was a direct challenge to El Patron's authority. Escobar could not tolerate such open defiance. His path to legitimacy was blocked. The stage was being set for a bloody confrontation with the Colombian state itself. The conflict escalated dramatically in April 1984. Rodrigo Lara Bonilla was assassinated in Bogotá. Hitmen on a motorcycle acting on Escobar's orders gunned him down. This was a watershed moment. It was a declaration of war against the Colombian government. The state, shocked and outraged, finally began to retaliate. The government approved an extradition treaty with the United States. Extradition to an American prison was Escobar's deepest fear. He famously vowed, "I would rather have a grave in Colombia than a jail cell in the US." The lines were drawn. His rise to power now faced its first true test. The Gilded Hand Escobar's cultivation of El Pueblo. Pablo Escobar understood the power of image. He craved adoration, a different kind of control. He built a persona as Robin Hood Paisa, a champion of the poor. His generosity was a calculated investment in loyalty. The most famous was the Barrio Pablo Escobar. He distributed cash directly to the needy. Grand displays of largesse. To them, Escobar was not a narco-terrorist. He was a benefactor, a savior. They formed an almost impenetrable barrier of human support. He was protected by the very people he claimed to serve. It was not born of pure altruism. It was a strategic tool for power and protection. The scourge of narco-terrorism. Colombia under siege. While some saw a benevolent patron, many others experienced Escobar's terror. His response to any opposition was swift and brutal. His war was not just against the state. It was against anyone who dared to challenge his dominion. As pressure mounted, his tactics grew more indiscriminate. Targeted assassinations gave way to horrifying acts of public violence. He sought to paralyze Colombia with fear. He aimed to make the cost of fighting him unbearable. The scale of bloodshed he unleashed was unprecedented. He plunged the nation into an era of profound darkness and chaos. Car bombs became his horrifying trademark. These devastating explosions ripped through city streets. They targeted government buildings, symbols of authority. But they also killed and maimed countless innocent civilians. The 1989 bombing of the DAS headquarters in Bogotá was a chilling example. It killed dozens and injured hundreds. Another horrific act was the bombing of Avianca Flight 203. He ordered it to kill a presidential candidate, Cesar Gaviria, who was not even on board. Instead, 107 innocent people perished. Ordinary life became a gamble. Public spaces, once vibrant, were now fraught with peril. The psychological toll was immense. Escobar's hitmen, his sicarios, also waged relentless assassination campaigns. They targeted the pillars of Colombian society. Politicians who spoke out against him, like Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla and presidential hopeful Luis Carlos Galán, were gunned down. Courageous judges who dared to prosecute his men met similar fates. Police officers were hunted for bounties. Hundreds were murdered in cold blood. Journalists who exposed his crimes, like Guillermo Cano, editor of El Espectador, paid the ultimate price. The message was clear: defy Pablo Escobar, and you will die. justice and free speech withered under this onslaught. The societal impact of this narco-terrorism was catastrophic. Trust in the government and its institutions eroded completely. Many citizens felt abandoned, unprotected. The violence became normalized in some regions, a grim backdrop to daily existence. Families were torn apart. Thousands were displaced, fleeing the bloodshed. The economy suffered, not just from the drug trade's distortions, but from the climate of fear. Colombia's international reputation was shattered. It became synonymous with cocaine and violence. An entire generation grew up under the shadow of Escobar's terror, a trauma that would linger for decades. Pablo Escobar's reign tore Colombian society in two. He created deep, bitter divisions that ran through the heart of the nation. On one side were those who benefited from his largesse, or who were too afraid to oppose him. They saw him as a necessary evil, or even a hero. On the other side were his countless victims and those who bravely fought against his tyranny. They saw him as a monster, a scourge. This polarization was not abstract. It affected neighborhoods, workplaces, and even families. Navigating this fractured landscape became a daily struggle for survival for many Colombians. Escobar masterfully exploited and amplified existing moral ambiguities. His supporters often rationalized his horrific crimes. They pointed to his charitable works. They argued that the state was corrupt and had failed the people long before he came along. This created a dangerous blurring of ethical lines. The idea that the ends could justify the means took root in some parts of society. It raised difficult questions about complicity. When does acceptance of help cross into endorsement of crime? When does silence become a form of collaboration? These were uncomfortable truths Colombia had to confront. The long-term psychological scars are undeniable. For those who lost loved ones to his bombs and bullets, the trauma is a lifelong burden. For the communities that once hailed him as a benefactor, his legacy is a complex mix. Gratitude is often tinged with the stigma of their association with his criminal enterprise. Reconciling these conflicting memories is a painful process. For Colombia as a whole, building a unified national narrative out of this dark chapter remains a formidable challenge. Acknowledging the suffering, the complicity, and the courage is essential for healing. Even in death, Escobar casts a long, twisted shadow over Colombian culture and global perceptions. The assassination of Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla was a grave miscalculation. Public outrage in Colombia reached a boiling point. Extradition to the United States became a tangible threat. Escobar unleashed a new wave of terror. He agreed to be imprisoned in a facility he would build and control himself. It was less a jail and more a fortress of luxury. Inside La Catedral, life for Pablo Escobar was far from that of a typical prisoner. He even ordered the torture and murder of several dissenting cartel members. The government realized the extent of their folly. In July 1992, they sent troops to La Catedral to oversee the transfer. Escobar simply walked out of his custom-built prison. He was no longer a powerful figure, he was a common fugitive. Following Escobar's escape from La Catedral, the Colombian government's patience snapped. They formed the elite search bloc to hunt him down. Handpicked and highly motivated, their mission was clear. The U.S. provided intelligence and advanced technology. Meanwhile, Los Pepes, a vigilante group, emerged. They aimed to annihilate Escobar and his organization. Los Pepes unleashed a brutal campaign of violence. Escobar was caught between the search bloc and Los Pepes. His empire crumbled under this relentless assault. Forced into hiding, he became a ghost in his own city. His network disintegrated, leaving him isolated and vulnerable. The final months of 1993 were a period of intense desperation for Pablo Escobar. His formidable inner circle had been decimated. Most of his trusted lieutenants, bodyguards, and sicarios were either dead, in prison, or had deserted him. He was like a hunted animal, relying on a dwindling number of supporters. He resorted to disguises, reportedly dyeing his hair and growing a thick beard to evade recognition. He communicated sparingly, acutely aware that his every phone call could potentially be traced by the authorities. The search bloc, armed with sophisticated American surveillance technology, was patiently and systematically tightening the net around him. His days as a free man were clearly numbered. On December 2, 1993, just one day after his 44th birthday, Pablo Escobar made a fatal error. He was holed up in a modest middle-class house in the Los Olivos neighborhood of Medellin. Driven by a need to connect with his family, who were under police protection in a Bogotá hotel, he made a lengthy telephone call to his son, Juan Pablo. Whether it was a moment of sentimentality, a lapse in his usually cautious judgment, or sheer arrogance, the call proved to be his undoing. The search block's specialized electronic surveillance team, which had been monitoring all communications involving his family, intercepted the call. Within minutes, they triangulated his precise location. Elite members of the search block, led by Colonel Hugo Aguilar, swiftly converged on the two-story house. They moved quickly to surround the property, sealing off any potential escape routes. A fierce gun battle erupted as Escobar and his lone remaining bodyguard, Álvaro de Jesus Agudelo, known as El Limón, realized they were trapped. They desperately returned fire. In a last-ditch effort to escape, Escobar and El Limón climbed onto an adjoining rooftop. They scrambled across the orange clay tiles, exchanging gunfire with the police officers closing in from the street and surrounding buildings. The streets below were swarming with heavily armed soldiers and police. There was no way out this time. Pablo Escobar was hit multiple times by police gunfire as he attempted to flee across the rooftop. He fell dead, his body sprawled on the tiles. The exact circumstances surrounding his death remain a subject of some debate. While the official account states he was killed by police bullets, some, including members of his family, have suggested he may have committed suicide with a shot to his own head, thus fulfilling his infamous vow to never be taken alive to a United States prison. Regardless, the graphic photos of his bloodied, barefoot corpse, surrounded by triumphant search block members, were transmitted around the globe almost immediately. The reign of the world's most infamous and brutal drug lord was definitively over. A dark and violent chapter in Colombian history had finally come to a close. The news crackled across radios. It blared from television screens. Pablo Escobar was dead. On December 2, 1993, the reign of terror had ended. In Medellin, his stronghold, a complex mix of emotions erupted. Some openly celebrated in the streets. They cheered the demise of the man who held their city hostage. Car horns blared in jubilation. For many, it was a moment of profound, almost unbelievable relief. The architect of so much fear, so much bloodshed was finally gone. A heavy cloud seemed to lift from Colombia. The long nightmare for many felt over. His death was more than just the end of a criminal. It was the fall of a dark legend. Pablo Escobar had projected an aura of invincibility. He had defied the state. He had outsmarted his enemies for years. He seemed untouchable, a phantom always one step ahead. His demise proved he was mortal after all. The search block, the elite police unit, became heroes. They had achieved what many thought impossible. They had hunted down and killed the world's most wanted man. This victory was a crucial morale boost for a nation battered by years of relentless narco-terrorism. Yet the triumph was tinged with sorrow and exhaustion. The hunt for Escobar had been long and incredibly bloody. Countless lives were lost in the process. Police officers, soldiers, judges, politicians, journalists, and innocent civilians all paid the price for his war against the state. His final years were marked by an escalation of violence. Car bombs and assassinations had become horrifyingly common. The relief at his death was therefore mixed with a grim understanding. The victory had come at an immense human cost. Colombia had bled profoundly to achieve this moment. With Escobar gone, an immediate power vacuum emerged. The drug trade did not vanish overnight. The Cali cartel, Escobar's rivals, were quick to seize control. They aimed to fill the void left by the fallen kingpin of Medellin. The flow of cocaine to international markets would continue, but something fundamental had changed. Escobar's particular brand of open warfare against the state, his campaign of public terror, was unique. His death signaled the end of that specific, horrifying era. While the problem of drug trafficking persisted, the acute fear of one man's unchecked brutality began to recede. Pablo Escobar left deep, festering wounds on the soul of Colombia. The trauma of his narco-terrorism campaign lingered for decades. The memory of car bombs exploding in bustling city centers was seared into the national psyche. The assassinations of public figures, the sheer audacity of his violence, created a climate of pervasive fear. This fear did not simply evaporate with his death, it left an indelible mark on a generation. The psychological impact on individuals and communities was profound. Rebuilding a sense of safety and security would be a long, arduous journey for the entire nation. Beyond the physical and psychological scars, Escobar institutionalized corruption on a massive scale. His plata o plomo philosophy had seeped into every level of society. It eroded trust in government, the police, and the judiciary. Many honest officials had been killed or intimidated into silence. Rebuilding these institutions, purging them of corrupt elements, became a critical challenge for post-Escobar Colombia. The long-term effects on the Colombian justice system were particularly severe. The country had to relearn how to dispense justice in the face of powerful criminal organizations. This was a slow and painful process of recovery. The paradox of Pablo Escobar as both villain and benefactor also cast a long shadow. In some impoverished Medellin barrios, particularly Barrio Pablo Escobar, his memory remained complicated. Some residents still viewed him with a degree of gratitude for the homes and amenities he provided. This made it difficult to forge a unified national narrative about his legacy. How could Colombia reconcile the image of a ruthless killer with that of a man who, for some, was a provider? This duality continued to spark debate and reflection. It highlighted the deep social inequalities that Escobar had so skillfully exploited. Despite the immense damage, Colombia demonstrated remarkable resilience. The people refused to be defined solely by this dark chapter. Efforts were made to reclaim public spaces, to strengthen democratic institutions, and to combat the ongoing threat of drug trafficking. Important lessons were learned about the dangers of unchecked criminal power. The nation embarked on a path of healing and reconstruction. The fight against organized crime continued, evolving to face new threats. But the specter of Escobar served as a constant reminder of the nation's capacity to endure and its determination to build a more peaceful future. Pablo Escobar's death did not consign him to historical footnotes. Instead, he transformed into a global icon of infamy. Hugely popular television series like Narcos brought his dramatic rise and fall to new generations. He became a fixture in global popular culture, a symbol of the ultimate outlaw. Escobar's reign and the fight against him profoundly influenced global drug policy. Strategies often focused on dismantling cartels by targeting their leaders. His legacy serves as a stark cautionary tale for the world.